At 70, while scrubbing gum from an airport floor at midnight, Nella Baptiste accidentally solved an algebra problem and shocked herself awake. Her grandson stared at the crooked numbers on an old ironing board table, and the grandmother who once left school suddenly saw a door crack open. Nella was a Haitian-American mother of 6, a woman who had spent 50 years feeding people, cleaning messes, and hiding her unfinished education under competence. She had quit school when survival came first, and survival kept coming in waves: rent, diapers, uniforms, bus fare, medicine, groceries, then grandchildren. By the time most people expect rest, Nella was pulling the night shift at a Minnesota airport, pushing a janitor's cart under brutal fluorescent light. Outside, winter pressed against the glass like a warning, and the buses arrived coated in ice, late enough to steal sleep. Inside, her body carried the cost of decades, especially the migraines that sliced behind her eyes while polished floors reflected every overhead bulb. Still, that algebra answer followed her through Terminal C, nagging her harder than the squeak of her cart wheels on waxed tile. She could not stop thinking about one wild possibility. If her brain still reached for X, maybe her future had not closed. So Nella enrolled to study for the GED. The first obstacle was not the math workbook or the reading packet, but shame, thick and private, sitting heavy in her throat. She imagined younger students noticing her age spots, her work shoes, her airport badge, and deciding she had arrived 50 years too late. She almost quit before lesson 1, which is how many dreams die. Not from inability, but from the humiliation of beginning. Nella answered that fear with a strategy small enough to survive embarrassment. She promised herself to study 10 minutes before judging herself. 10 minutes became pages, because starting shrank the monster into sentences, fractions, and answer bubbles instead of one giant verdict on her life. At home, she turned her kitchen into a stubborn classroom, balancing notebooks beside plantains, tea mugs, and a lamp with a weak yellow glow. The table was still the old ironing board, patched and narrow, but now it held sharpened pencils like tiny declarations. She taped vocabulary words to cereal boxes, pantry jars, and the refrigerator door, so breakfast became a reading test before sunrise. Her recipe binder became a secret study weapon, stuffed with flashcards between griot, rice, and soup directions worn soft by decades. While simmering dinner, she quizzed herself on formulas and definitions, turning waiting time into training instead of letting it drain away unnoticed. At the airport, she built memory from whatever the night handed her, even the delay announcements echoing over tired travelers and closed kiosks. Every gate change became a cue, every repeated destination pinned a fact in her mind, because she refused to waste the minutes her job scattered. She studied under vending machine lights during break, their cold flicker painting her workbook, while candy spirals glowed beside multiplication and grammar drills. It was not glamorous, and that mattered, because resilience rarely looks heroic while it is happening. It looks like somebody staying seated. Some nights, the humiliation stung harder than the cold, especially when passengers rushed by, dragging sleek luggage past her open textbook and mop bucket. She felt exposed there, a 70-year-old cleaner reviewing sentence structure beside potato chips, as if ambition itself had caught her off guard. But Nella learned a hard, practical truth. Embarrassment is not evidence that you should stop. It is evidence that growth is visible. So instead of waiting to feel dignified, she worked while dignity was still bruised, letting repetition build confidence her emotions could not supply. The migraines were tougher than pride, arriving like a blackout curtain and making numbers blur into cruel little insects on the page. On those days, she stopped forcing speed and switched tactics, studying in short bursts, covering one problem at a time with an index card. She lowered the demand without lowering the standard, which is another useful rule. Make the steps smaller, not the goals smaller. When bus rides across Minnesota froze her fingers and stole an hour she wanted for sleep, she used the windows as mirrors for review. Fatigue tempted her to skip practice because exhaustion always sounds reasonable and often wears the voice of self-protection. Nella outsmarted that voice by deciding in advance exactly when she would study, so effort relied less on mood and more on routine. Monday was reading with tea after work, Tuesday was algebra at the ironing board table, Wednesday was flashcards before church, and so on. A calendar on the wall turned into proof, each crossed-out square reminding her that progress is easier to trust when it is visible. Her grandchildren watched this transformation in pieces, taped words on cereal boxes, pencil marks on receipts, and grandma nodding off over equations. They had always heard her tell them to finish what they started, but now they saw those words sweating in real time. That changed the house because example lands harder than advice, especially when the example wears orthopedic shoes and smells like lemon disinfectant. Nella's children worried about her health and her schedule, and love sometimes disguised itself as caution, asking if this was too much. She listened, then kept going, not recklessly but deliberately, showing that support matters most when it strengthens effort instead of replacing choice. Practice tests brought their own storms, especially the sting of missed questions that seemed to expose old gaps she had carried for decades. She stopped treating mistakes like personal insults and started labeling them like airport tasks, something to identify, clean up, and move past. That shift was powerful and practical. If you name the problem specifically, you can build a strategy specifically. So a wrong algebra question meant reviewing slopes after dinner, not concluding she was too old, too tired, or too late. The night before the exam, her study materials sat in stacks around the kitchen, humble and battle-worn, each page earned in stolen minutes. She did not look like a movie heroine. She looked like a grandmother with aching feet, a headache threatening behind one eye, and courage anyway. At the testing center, the fluorescent light felt familiar, just another cousin of the airport glow that had witnessed her preparation. Her hands trembled over the questions, but they were the hands that had raised 6 children, cleaned endless terminals, and learned under vending machine lights. One by one, the sections ended, and each finished page felt less like an exam and more like reclaimed ground. Then came the waiting, that long, raw hallway where doubt returns dressed as memory, replaying every sacrifice and every almost quit. When the result finally arrived, Nella stood on the airport concourse beside her janitor's cart loaded with lemons and disinfectant. There, between polished floors and rolling suitcases, she learned she had passed her GED at 70 years old. Tears came fast and unguarded, not because a certificate erased hardship, but because it named a truth hardship had tried to bury. She was not the woman who had fallen behind. She was the woman who kept returning, one bus ride, one flashcard, one painful night at a time. Her grandchildren cheered her in that same concourse, surrounding the cleaner they had always loved, and suddenly seeing the scholar she had become. The woman who spent 50 years telling them they could finish anything they started had finally placed her own sentence at the end. Her victory changed more than her resume, because success at that age rearranged what the whole family believed was still possible. It made unfinished things look less like permanent failures and more like postponed work waiting for a new calendar. Nella's story offers tools, not just inspiration. Tie learning to routines you already keep, so progress rides existing habits instead of fragile motivation. Make your environment teach you by putting reminders where your hands already go, whether on mirrors, lunch bags, medicine cabinets, or coffee makers. Use dead time like bus rides, break rooms, and waiting lines as rehearsal space because scattered minutes become a powerful education when collected. Study in smaller pieces when pain or exhaustion arrives because adapting the method protects the mission instead of abandoning it. Most of all, do not wait for a noble feeling before you begin because confidence often shows up late and expects to find you already working. Nella did not chase perfect conditions. She chased the next usable minute, and those minutes carried her further than talent ever could. Somewhere tonight, another person is telling themselves they missed their chance years ago, and that lie sounds especially convincing in the dark. Picture Nella under vending machine light, mouthing vocabulary beside a mop bucket, and remember that late is not the same thing as impossible. If there is something unfinished in your life, start with 10 minutes, 1 page, 1 card, 1 bus ride, and let small proof silence big doubt.